Do practicing Christians know and or care, and I'm asking sincerely here, that the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, were written decades after Jesus died, like 40 to 70 plus years, and they were not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and or John?
Did you know that not a single person who wrote a single word of the Bible has met Jesus? Hi, my name is Maddie Mae Modal. I'm a Bible scholar specializing in gender and sexuality, and I'm a Christian. And I admit that this statement can sound really destabilizing or scary, but within biblical scholarship, it's really well established and it doesn't threaten my faith. And here's why. So first of all, we know that a lot of the Hebrew Bible was written way before Jesus was born, and the New Testament was written significantly after Jesus' death, roughly between 50 or 100 CE. So likely what your church taught you, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were disciples of Jesus and followed him around with a pen and paper, is just not true, and it's never been true. In fact, the gospel accounts don't even claim that they met Jesus. They never identify their authors as eyewitnesses, and these gospels weren't named until way later. And just so we're clear, none of this is fringe scholarship. This isn't something that I came up with. Even the most conservative Bible scholars agree this is just basic historical method. And if now you're thinking, well, then how do we even know if Jesus actually existed? Well, we have several historical texts that testify to the fact that Jesus was a historical person. How much access we have to him as a historical person, though, well, that's a whole other thing. What we should not do, however, is fall into the modern trap of believing that just because these texts are not eyewitness accounts, that means that they're unreliable or inaccurate. Because that assumption reflects a modern post-Enlightenment perspective on what truth is. And frankly, none of the biblical authors are worried about that. Because ancient Jewish and early Christian communities preserved truth through interpretation and storytelling, not fact-based reporting. And we see lots of evidence for this in Second Temple Judaism, that scripture was never treated as a closed artifact. Instead, it was an open, generative, living, breathing text that every person was invited to engage with. These authors treated the Jesus tradition in a very similar way. The Gospels function as extended narrative interpretation of Jesus' significance, shaped by community memory, theological conviction, interaction with other myths and religions, and even lived experience. The Gospels are not transcripts, they're not history books, they're faithful and worshipful retellings. Because for these ancient authors, just because something is fiction, just because something is myth, doesn't mean it's not true. And this is a good thing, I promise, okay? Stick with me. Because this means that Christianity was never built on the idea of perfect historical accuracy or access. Instead, it was built on communal remembering, interpretive storytelling, and the belief that God continues to speak throughout that process. So as a Bible scholar, when I hear that no biblical author met the actual person, Jesus, for me, it doesn't undermine scripture. And I don't think it should for you either. Instead, I think it helps us read it more honestly. The Bible doesn't shut down imagination. It encourages it. And faith from the very beginning has depended on a story. And this is a story that every single one of us is invited into.